The blood from her split lip froze before it reached her chin, and Sarah Hartford knew that if she stopped moving through this whiteout, she would die just as surely as if she had stayed in that house with Malcolm. The blizzard had descended on the Dakota Territory like God's own wrath, turning the world into a howling void of white and cold that stung her face like 1,000 needles. But still, she pushed forward through drifts that came up to her knees, her thin coat doing almost nothing against the wind that cut through to her bones. She had left everything behind except the clothes on her back, and the desperate hope that distance would somehow save her from the man who had promised to love and cherish her, but had instead turned their marriage into a living nightmare of fists and fury. Her hands had gone numb an hour ago, maybe more. Time had lost all meaning in the storm. She could barely see 3 feet in front of her face, and the only thing that kept her moving was the terror that Malcolm would somehow find her, drag her back to that cabin outside lead, and make good on his promise that if she ever tried to leave him, she would regret it for whatever short time she had left to live. The wind screamed in her ears like all the demons of hell, and Sarah stumbled over something buried in the snow, falling hard onto her hands and knees. The cold bit through her skirts instantly, and for a moment she considered just staying there, letting the snow cover her like a blanket, letting sleep take her away from all of this. But then she thought of her sister in Deadwood, just 15 miles north, and she forced herself to stand again. 15 miles might as well have been 1,000 in this weather, but it was all she had. The fight that morning had been worse than usual. Malcolm had come home from the mine with whiskey on his breath and rage in his eyes, angry about something his foreman had said, angry about the cold, angry about everything and nothing. When she had asked him to please sit down and eat the stew she had made, he had backhanded her so hard she had seen stars. Then he had grabbed her by the throat and slammed her against the wall, and in his eyes she had seen something that went beyond anger into a dark place where her death was not just possible but inevitable. She had waited until he passed out in his chair. Then she had run. No bag, no supplies, just the overwhelming need to get away before he woke up and finished what he had started. The blizzard had begun not long after she left the cabin, but turning back had never been an option. Malcolm Hartford was not a man who forgave, and he was not a man who let go of what he considered his property. She was 22 years old, and she had been married to him for 3 years that felt like 30, 3 years of walking on eggshells and covering bruises, and lying to anyone who asked if everything was all right. The snow was coming down so thick now that Sarah could barely tell up from down. Her feet were blocks of ice in her worn boots, and her lungs burned with every breath of frigid air. She tried to keep walking in a straight line north, but the wind kept pushing her sideways, and she had long since lost any sense of direction. Tears froze on her cheeks, and she realized she was crying, though she had not been aware of it. The cold was seeping into her very soul now, making her thoughts slow and muddy, and she knew with a clarity that cut through the fog that she was going to die out here in this storm. Then through the white chaos she saw a dark shape, large and solid, and for a moment her heart seized with terror that it was Malcolm, that he had somehow followed her through the blizzard. But the shape moved, and she realized it was a horse, and on that horse was a man hunched against the wind. She tried to call out, but her voice was lost in the howling storm, so she stumbled toward the shape, waving her arms frantically. The horse shied away from her sudden movement, but the man on its back saw her and immediately dismounted, his tall frame appearing through the snow like a ghost. "Jesus Christ, what are you doing out here?" His voice was deep and rough, and he did not wait for an answer before he was shrugging out of his heavy coat and wrapping it around her shoulders. The warmth of it was so sudden and shocking that Sarah almost sobbed. "Can you walk? My place is not far." "Come on, you have got to get inside." She tried to answer, but her teeth were chattering so hard she could not form words. The man, whoever he was, seemed to understand. He picked her up as easily as if she weighed nothing and set her on his horse, then climbed up behind her, his arms coming around her to take the reins. His body blocked the worst of the wind, and Sarah found herself leaning back against his solid warmth, too cold and exhausted to care about propriety or caution. The horse began to move, and the man guided it with a sureness that suggested he knew exactly where he was going even in this impossible storm. It felt like both an eternity and no time at all before a building materialized out of the blizzard, a sturdy barn with a house beyond it. The man rode the horse right into the barn and dismounted, then reached up to lift Sarah down. Her legs buckled when her feet hit the ground, and he caught her easily, supporting her weight. "Can you make it to the house? It is just across the yard." Sarah nodded, though she was not at all sure she could. But the man kept his arm around her, half carrying her through the snow to the back door of the house. Inside it was blessedly warm, and Sarah stood dripping melting snow onto the wooden floor while the man quickly built up the fire in the stove. The house was small but well kept, one main room with a kitchen area and a sitting area, and a door that presumably led to a bedroom. There were no feminine touches anywhere, no curtains or doilies or the sort of decorative items that women added to homes. "You need to get out of those wet clothes," the man said, turning to look at her for the first time in proper light. He was younger than his rough voice had suggested, maybe 25 or 26, with dark hair and eyes that were an unusual shade of gray-green. His face was weathered from outdoor work but handsome in a rugged way, with a strong jaw and a mouth that looked like it smiled easily, though it was not smiling now. His expression was one of concern as he took in her appearance, and Sarah realized what he must be seeing. Her split lip, the bruise blooming on her cheekbone, her soaked and frozen state, those gray-green eyes darkened. "Who did that to you?" "I need to keep going north," Sarah said, and was dismayed to hear how weak her voice sounded. "I need to get to Deadwood. My sister is there." "Lady, you are not going anywhere in this storm. It is a full-on blizzard out there. You would be dead in an hour." He went to a chest in the corner and pulled out what looked like an old shirt and some woolen socks. "Here, go in there and change into these. They will be too big, but they are dry. Then we will get you warm and fed, and you can tell me what has you running through a Dakota blizzard in January." Sarah took the clothes with shaking hands, but she did not move toward the bedroom. "Is there anyone else here? Your wife or—" "I live alone," he said, "and I give you my word you are safe here. Whatever or whoever you are running from, you are safe in this house." Something in his voice made her believe him. Maybe it was the exhaustion and cold, or maybe it was the genuine concern in his eyes, but Sarah found herself nodding and stumbling into the bedroom. She peeled off her frozen dress and underclothes with clumsy, numb fingers and pulled on the shirt he had given her. It was made of soft flannel and hung down to her knees. The socks came up to her thighs. She emerged from the bedroom to find the man ladling soup into a bowl from a pot on the stove. "Sit down before you fall down," he said, gesturing to a chair he had pulled close to the stove. Sarah sank into it gratefully, and he handed her the bowl of soup. It was thick with vegetables and chunks of beef, and the first spoonful sent warmth spreading through her center. She ate ravenously, barely tasting it, just needing the heat and sustenance. The man sat down across from her with his own bowl, eating more slowly and watching her with those thoughtful eyes. "My name is Isaac Jameson," he said when she had finished the soup and was holding the bowl in both hands. absorbing its warmth. "I have a ranch about 5 miles south of Lead. Cattle mostly, some horses. I was out trying to get my stock into shelter when I saw you." "Sarah Hartford," she said quietly. "Thank you for saving my life, Mr. Jameson." "Isaac," he corrected. "And you are welcome. Now do you want to tell me about that husband you are running from?" Sarah's head jerked up. "How did you know? You said you need to get to your sister in Deadwood, but you are coming from the direction of Lead. You have a ring on your finger but no wedding band. And a woman does not run into a blizzard without supplies or proper clothing unless she is running from something terrible." Isaac's voice was gentle but firm. "So I am guessing your husband is in Lead, and he is the one who gave you those bruises." Sarah looked down at her hands, at the simple silver ring Malcolm had given her when they married. She had not even thought to take it off. "He is going to come looking for me when the storm stops." "Let him come," Isaac said, and there was steel in his voice now. "You are under my protection now, Mrs. Hartford, and I do not care what the law says about a man and his wife. No man has the right to beat a woman." "You do not know Malcolm," Sarah said, and heard the tremor in her own voice. "He will kill me if he finds me. He promised he would." "Then we will make sure he does not find you," Isaac said. "When the storm clears, I will take you to your sister in Deadwood if that is what you want. But for now you need to rest and get warm. You were close to freezing to death when I found you." Sarah nodded, but she could not stop the tears that suddenly spilled down her cheeks. The relief of being warm and safe, even temporarily, was overwhelming. Isaac reached out and covered her hand with his, the gesture simple and comforting. His hand was large and calloused from work, but his touch was gentle. "You do not have to run," he said quietly. "Not anymore. I will help you." Those words, that simple promise, broke something open in Sarah's chest. She had been so alone for so long, carrying the weight of her terrible marriage in silence, because Malcolm had isolated her from everyone she knew, because she was ashamed, because she had not known how to escape. And now this stranger, this cowboy who had found her in a blizzard, was offering her help without asking for anything in return. She wept, and Isaac let her, not trying to shush her or tell her everything would be fine, just sitting there with his hand over hers while the storm raged outside and the fire crackled in the stove. When the tears finally subsided, Sarah felt hollowed out but also somehow lighter. Isaac got up and poured her a cup of coffee, strong and hot, and she wrapped her hands around the tin cup. "The storm should blow itself out by tomorrow," he said. "We will see then what needs to be done, but tonight you should sleep. You can have the bed and I will sleep out here by the stove." "I cannot take your bed," Sarah protested, but Isaac shook his head. "Yes, you can. I have slept in worse places than a comfortable chair. Go on now, get some rest. You are safe here, I promise." Sarah was too exhausted to argue further. She went into the bedroom and climbed under the heavy quilts on the bed, still wearing Isaac's flannel shirt. The bed smelled like clean linen and something else, something masculine and comforting that she realized must be Isaac himself. She was asleep almost before her head hit the pillow, falling into a deep, dreamless sleep born of exhaustion and relief. She woke once in the night to use the chamber pot, and when she emerged from the bedroom, she saw Isaac asleep in the chair by the stove, a blanket pulled over him. Even in sleep, he looked strong and capable, and Sarah felt a rush of gratitude toward this man who had shown her more kindness in a few hours than her husband had in 3 years. She crept back to bed and slept until morning light filtered through the window. The storm was still raging when she woke, the wind howling around the house. Sarah got up and ventured out to the main room to find Isaac already awake, frying eggs and bacon on the stove. He looked up when she entered and gave her a smile that transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made Sarah's heart skip in an entirely unfamiliar way. "Morning. How are you feeling?" "Warmer." "Better." Sarah touched her split lip gingerly. It was swollen, but the bleeding had stopped. "Thank you again for taking me in." "No thanks needed." Isaac gestured to the table. "Sit down and eat. We are going to be stuck here for at least another day by the looks of that storm." They ate breakfast together, and Isaac asked her about her sister in Deadwood. Sarah told him about Emma, who was 5 years older and had married a shopkeeper in the gold rush town. She had not seen Emma in over a year, not since Malcolm had forbidden her to make the trip, claiming it was too dangerous. In truth, Sarah knew, he had not wanted her to have contact with anyone who might encourage her to leave him. "What about you?" Sarah asked. "Do you have family around here?" Isaac shook his head. "My parents died of cholera when I was 16. I have a brother somewhere in California, but we have not been in touch in years. I came out here 5 years ago with nothing but a horse and a bedroll, worked as a ranch hand until I had enough saved to buy this place. It is not much, but it is mine." There was pride in his voice, and Sarah understood it. In a hard land like this, carving out something of your own was no small feat. "It is a good place," she said. "You should be proud of what you have built." "I am," Isaac said simply. Then he looked at her directly, his gray-green eyes serious. "I want you to know that you can stay here as long as you need to. If you want to go to your sister, I will take you. But if you want to stay, or if you need somewhere to hide until you figure out what to do next, this house is yours." "I mean that." "Why would you do that for me?" Sarah asked. "You do not even know me." Isaac was quiet for a moment, turning his coffee cup in his hands. "My mother," he said finally. "Before she died, she had bruises sometimes that she tried to hide. My father was a good man when he was sober, but when he drank he got mean. I was too young to do anything about it, and it has haunted me ever since. So when I see a woman in trouble, I do not turn away. I cannot." Sarah felt her eyes prickling with tears again. "I am sorry about your mother." "Me too." Isaac stood up and went to the window, looking out at the white chaos beyond. "Storm is not letting up any. We might be here a few days. I hope you do not mind my company." "I do not mind at all," Sarah said, and realized with some surprise that she meant it. Despite the circumstances, or perhaps because of them, she felt more at ease with Isaac Jameson than she had felt with anyone in a long time. They spent the day in the warm house while the blizzard raged outside. Isaac showed Sarah his small collection of books, and she was surprised to find that he was better read than she might have expected. He had volumes of poetry, some novels, and several books on animal husbandry and ranching. They played cards, and Isaac taught her a game called poker that he said he had learned from a gambler in Cheyenne. Sarah found herself laughing at his stories, really laughing, and the sound felt strange in her own ears because it had been so long. In the afternoon, Isaac went out to the barn to check on his horse and the cattle he had managed to get into shelter. He came back covered in snow, stamping his feet and brushing ice from his hair. "Still coming down hard. I have never seen a storm like this, and I have been through 5 Dakota winters." That night they ate stew that Isaac had made, and Sarah insisted on washing the dishes while he sat by the fire and read. It felt oddly domestic, and Sarah tried not to think about how different this was from her evenings with Malcolm, which had been spent in tense silence or angry shouting. When she was finished with the dishes, she sat down in the other chair by the fire, and Isaac looked up from his book. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "And you do not have to answer if you do not want to." Sarah nodded, bracing herself. "Why did you marry him? Your husband?" Sarah sighed. "He was not always like this. When I met him, he was charming and attentive. He worked hard and he talked about building a future. My parents had died the year before and I was alone, and Malcolm seemed like an answer to everything. It was not until after we married that he changed. Or maybe he did not change at all. Maybe that was who he really was all along and he just hid it until he had me trapped. Isaac's jaw tightened. That is not your fault. You know that, right? I know, but it does not always feel that way. Sarah looked into the fire, watching the flames dance. I thought about leaving before many times, but I had nowhere to go, no money of my own. Malcolm controlled everything, and I was afraid. I am still afraid. That is understandable, Isaac said, but you were brave enough to run into a blizzard to get away from him. That takes more courage than most people have. Sarah met his eyes across the firelight. Or desperation. Sometimes courage and desperation are the same thing, Isaac said quietly. They sat in companionable silence for a while, and then Sarah stood up. I should let you sleep. Thank you, Isaac. For everything. Sleep well, Sarah. The next 2 days passed in much the same way. The storm continued to rage, keeping them trapped inside, but Sarah found that she did not mind. Isaac was easy company, thoughtful and kind. And more than once Sarah caught herself watching him and feeling something she had not felt in years. A stirring of attraction and interest that had nothing to do with fear or obligation. She tried to push the feelings away, reminding herself that she was still legally married, that she had only just escaped one terrible situation and should not be thinking about another man. But Isaac made it difficult to remember all the reasons she should keep her distance. On the third day, the storm finally began to abate, the wind dying down to occasional gusts instead of a constant howl. Isaac ventured outside to assess the damage and returned with news that the snow had drifted as high as the barn roof in some places. It is going to take days for the roads to be passable, he said. Maybe a week or more. Sarah felt a complicated mix of relief and anxiety. Part of her wanted to get to Emma as soon as possible, to put more distance between herself and Malcolm. But another part of her, a part that was growing stronger by the day, wanted to stay here in this warm house with this kind man who made her feel safe and seen in a way she had never experienced before. That night, as they sat by the fire after supper, Isaac said, I need to tell you something. And I need you to know I am not saying it to pressure you or make you uncomfortable. Sarah's heart began to beat faster. What is it? Isaac took a deep breath. I think you are the bravest, strongest woman I have ever met, and I think you are beautiful. And I know this is not the right time, and I know you have been through hell, but I cannot help how I feel. I am falling in love with you, Sarah Hartford, and I needed you to know that. Sarah stared at him, her mind reeling. Part of her wanted to say that it was too soon, that he could not possibly love her after only a few days, that she was still married and broken and not ready for this. But another part of her, the part that had been slowly coming back to life in the warmth and safety of this house, knew with absolute certainty that she felt the same way. Against all logic and reason, she had fallen in love with Isaac Jameson, this cowboy who had found her in a blizzard and offered her sanctuary without asking for anything in return. I feel it too, she whispered. I do not understand how it is possible, but I feel it too. Isaac stood up and crossed to her chair, kneeling down in front of her. I know you are still married in the eyes of the law, and I know we have only known each other a few days. But Sarah, I want you to know that I will wait as long as it takes. I will help you get a divorce if that is what you want. I will fight for you if I have to, because I think you are worth fighting for. Sarah reached out and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips. No one has ever fought for me before. Then it is about time someone did, Isaac said. He covered her hand with his, pressing it against his cheek. You deserve to be loved, Sarah. Really loved, the way you should have been all along. "So do you," she said, and then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was a gentle kiss, tentative and sweet, and it tasted like hope and new beginnings. Isaac kissed her back carefully, as if she were something precious that might break. When they pulled apart, Sarah was crying again, but this time they were good tears, tears of relief and joy and the overwhelming sensation of being truly wanted for the first time in her life. "I want to stay," she said. "Not just until the storm clears. I want to stay here with you if you will have me." "Nothing would make me happier," Isaac said. He kissed her again, and this time there was more heat in it, more promise. But he pulled back before things could go further. "We will do this right," he said. "We will get you to Deadwood, talk to your sister, see about getting you a divorce. And then, when you are free and ready, I will marry you proper if you will have me." "I will have you," Sarah said, and laughed at the absurdity of it all, at the fact that the worst day of her life had led to the best thing that had ever happened to her. They stayed up late that night, talking and kissing by the fire, making plans for a future that had seemed impossible just days ago. Isaac told her about his dreams for the ranch, about wanting to expand the cattle operation and maybe start breeding horses. Sarah told him about her love of books and how she had always wanted to learn to ride properly. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other. And when Sarah finally went to bed in the early hours of the morning, she felt lighter than she had in years. The next day dawned clear and cold, the sun shining on a world transformed by snow. Isaac saddled 2 horses and they rode out together, Sarah bundled in layers of Isaac's clothes. The landscape was breathtakingly beautiful, all white and pristine, and Sarah felt a surge of joy at being alive to see it. They spent hours digging out paths to the barn and checking on Isaac's cattle, most of which had survived the storm. It was hard work, but Sarah did not mind. There was something satisfying about the physical labor, about working alongside Isaac toward a common goal. Over the next week, as the snow slowly began to melt and the roads became passable again, Sarah and Isaac fell into a routine. They worked together during the day, taking care of the animals and the property. In the evenings they cooked together, ate together, talked and read by the fire. At night they slept in separate beds, Isaac insisting on propriety even though they both wanted more. He was being respectful of her situation, of the fact that she was technically still married, and Sarah loved him all the more for it. But she also knew that they could not stay in this bubble forever. Malcolm would be looking for her by now, and sooner or later he would come to Isaac's ranch. They needed to take action, and they needed to do it soon. "We should go to Deadwood," Sarah said one morning over breakfast. "Today, if the road is clear enough, I need to see Emma and we need to talk to a lawyer about getting a divorce." Isaac nodded. "I was thinking the same thing. I will hitch up the wagon and we can leave this afternoon. It will take most of the day to get there, but we can stay with your sister overnight and come back tomorrow." They made the journey to Deadwood in the cold afternoon sunshine, the wagon creaking through the ruts in the snow-packed road. Sarah sat close to Isaac on the bench seat, partly for warmth and partly because she could not bear to be far from him. She kept watching the road behind them, nervous that Malcolm would appear, but the road remained empty save for the occasional other traveler. Deadwood was a bustling gold rush town, chaotic and loud, and Sarah directed Isaac to the general store where her sister's husband worked. Emma was behind the counter when they entered, and her face went white when she saw Sarah. "Sarah. Oh my God, Sarah." Emma rushed around the counter and grabbed her sister in a fierce hug. "Where have you been? Malcolm came here 3 days ago looking for you. He said you had run off in the storm and he was worried sick. I told him I had not seen you, but he did not believe me. He has been asking around town." Sarah's blood ran cold. "He is here. In Deadwood, he was. I do not know if he still is." Emma pulled back and took in Sarah's appearance, the fading bruises on her face. Her expression hardened. "He did that to you, did he not? I knew something was wrong. I tried to visit you last summer and he turned me away at the door, said you were sick. But you were not sick, were you?" "No," Sarah said quietly. "Emma, this is Isaac Jameson. He saved my life." Emma looked at Isaac properly for the first time, taking in his tall frame and protective stance next to Sarah. "Thank you," she said simply. Then she turned back to Sarah. "Come upstairs. We need to talk." The apartment above the store was small but cozy, and Emma's husband Thomas greeted them warmly. When Emma explained the situation, Thomas's face grew serious. "We need to get you to a lawyer right away. If Malcolm is in town, we do not have much time." They went to see a lawyer named Mr. Brennan, who had an office on Main Street. He listened to Sarah's story with a grave expression, occasionally taking notes. When she was finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. "I am going to be honest with you, Mrs. Hartford. Getting a divorce is difficult under the best of circumstances, and these are not the best circumstances. South Dakota Territory does not have very progressive divorce laws. Your best bet is to claim desertion, but that will require you to live apart from your husband for a significant period of time, and if he contests it, which I imagine he will, the process could take years." Sarah felt her heart sink. "Years?" "There is another option," Mr. Brennan said slowly. "If you could prove adultery or extreme cruelty, the court might be more sympathetic. Do you have any witnesses to the abuse?" Sarah shook her head. "Malcolm made sure we were isolated. No one saw what he did to me." Isaac leaned forward. "What about medical evidence? She had bruises, a split lip." "That would help, but it is not conclusive. He could claim she fell or had an accident." Mr. Brennan looked at Sarah with sympathy. "I am sorry, Mrs. Hartford. I wish I had better news for you." They left the lawyer's office in a somber mood. Sarah felt the weight of despair settling over her shoulders again. Even having escaped Malcolm, she was still trapped by him, bound by laws that did not care about her suffering. Isaac took her hand as they walked back toward Emma's store. "We will figure this out," he said. "Even if it takes years, we will figure it out. You are not going back to him, Sarah. I do not care what the law says." But before Sarah could respond, a voice called out from behind them. "Sarah," she froze, recognizing that voice even before she turned around. Malcolm Hartford stood in the middle of the street, his coat unbuttoned despite the cold, his face flushed with anger or drink or both. He was a big man, broad and solid, and right now he looked like violence personified. "I have been looking everywhere for you," Malcolm said, his voice deceptively calm as he walked toward them. "You had me so worried, running off in that storm. I thought you were dead." "Stay away from me, Malcolm," Sarah said, her voice shaking but firm. Isaac stepped in front of her, putting himself between her and her husband. Malcolm's eyes flicked to Isaac and his expression hardened. "Who the hell are you, Isaac Jameson? And you need to leave Sarah alone." Malcolm laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Sarah is my wife." "This is none of your business, Cowboy. Sarah, come here. We are going home." "I am not going anywhere with you," Sarah said, stepping out from behind Isaac. "I am leaving you, Malcolm. I am getting a divorce." Malcolm's face went dark with rage. "Like hell you are. You are my wife, and you will do what I say. Now get over here before I drag you." "You are not dragging anyone anywhere," Isaac said, and his voice had gone cold and hard in a way Sarah had never heard before. "The lady said she is not going with you. I suggest you respect her wishes and walk away." "Or what?" Malcolm sneered. "You going to fight me over another man's wife? You want my sloppy seconds, Cowboy." Isaac moved so fast Sarah barely saw it. One moment he was standing still, the next his fist connected with Malcolm's jaw with a crack that echoed down the street. Malcolm staggered back, blood spurting from his mouth, and then he charged forward with a roar of rage. The two men collided in a tangle of fists and fury. Sarah screamed, and people began running out of the shops to watch. Malcolm was bigger, but Isaac was younger and faster, and he fought with a cold precision that spoke of experience. They went down in the snow, grappling and punching, and Sarah saw blood on both their faces. "Stop it! Stop!" Sarah was crying, terrified that Malcolm would kill Isaac, but neither man was listening. Then Thomas was there, along with several other men, and they pulled the fighters apart. Malcolm was bleeding from his nose and mouth, his eye already swelling shut. Isaac had a cut on his cheekbone and his knuckles were torn, but he looked far less damaged than Malcolm. "I will kill you," Malcolm snarled at Isaac, struggling against the men holding him. "I will kill you both." "You are not killing anyone," a new voice said, and Sarah looked up to see a man with a sheriff's badge stepping into the circle. "What is going on here?" Malcolm immediately tried to change his demeanor, putting on a reasonable expression despite the blood on his face. "Sheriff, this man attacked me. I was just trying to get my wife to come home with me, and he started a fight." "That is not true," Sarah said, finding her voice. "My husband has been beating me for 3 years. I left him and Mr. Jameson took me in during the blizzard. Malcolm came here to drag me back and Isaac was protecting me." The sheriff looked from Sarah to Malcolm to Isaac, his expression neutral. "Is this true, Hartford? You've been beating your wife." "She is lying," Malcolm said. "She is hysterical. You know how women get." "I am not lying," Sarah said, and she pulled back her sleeve to show the old bruises on her arm, the ones that were fading to yellow and green. "He did this, and more. I ran into a blizzard to get away from him because I thought he was going to kill me." The sheriff's expression hardened. "Hartford, I think you better come with me to the jail while we sort this out. You cannot arrest me. She is my wife. I can and I am. You just threatened to kill 2 people in front of witnesses, and there is evidence of assault. Come along now, or I will add resisting arrest to the charges." Malcolm looked like he wanted to argue, but the sheriff's hand was on his gun, and the men holding Malcolm had firm grips on his arms. "This is not over," he said to Sarah. "You are still my wife, and the law is on my side." "We will see about that," the sheriff said, and he led Malcolm away toward the jail. The crowd began to disperse, and Emma rushed forward to throw her arms around Sarah. "Are you all right? Oh, Sarah, I was so scared." "I am fine," Sarah said, though she was shaking. She turned to Isaac, who was wiping blood from his face with his sleeve. "Are you hurt?" "Nothing serious," Isaac said, "but I think we should get off the street." They went back to Emma's apartment, where Thomas produced a bottle of whiskey and Emma tended to Isaac's cut cheek and split knuckles. Sarah sat close to him, holding his uninjured hand, still trembling with reaction. "What happens now?" Emma asked. "Will the sheriff really arrest Malcolm?" "For threatening us, maybe," Thomas said. "But they will not hold him long. He is right about one thing. The law is on his side when it comes to his marriage." "Not if I can help it," Sarah said. She looked at Isaac. "I want to go back to Lead tomorrow and get a few things from the cabin. My mother's jewelry, some clothes, the deed to my parents' farm. Malcolm has it in a box under the bed. If I can get that deed, I can sell the land and have money of my own. It might help with the divorce." Isaac frowned. "I do not like the idea of you going back there, even with him in jail." "I will not be alone. You will be with me." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Please, Isaac, I need to do this. I need to take back what is mine." After a long moment, Isaac nodded. "All right. We will go tomorrow at first light, but we will not stay any longer than we have to." They spent the night at Emma's, Sarah and Emma sharing the bed while Isaac slept on the floor of the main room with Thomas. In the morning, after a quick breakfast, Sarah and Isaac climbed into the wagon and began the journey back toward Lead. It was a cold, clear day, and Sarah tried not to think about what they might find at the cabin she had shared with Malcolm. The cabin looked exactly as she had left it, the door still unlocked from her hasty departure. Inside it was cold and empty, and Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. This place held so many bad memories, so much pain and fear. She wanted to gather what she needed and leave as quickly as possible. Isaac stayed close to her as she went through the cabin, collecting her few possessions. She found her mother's jewelry box in the drawer where she had hidden it, and the deed to her parents' farm was indeed in a metal box under the bed, along with some cash that Malcolm had been hoarding. Sarah took it all without guilt. She had earned this money 100 times over in blood and tears. They were about to leave when they heard the sound of a horse outside. Sarah's heart leaped into her throat, but when she looked out the window she saw it was not Malcolm but the sheriff from Deadwood. "Mr. Jameson, Mrs. Hartford," the sheriff said when Isaac opened the door. "I thought I might find you here." "Is something wrong?" Isaac asked. "Has Malcolm been released?" "No, he is still in jail, but he will not be there much longer. A judge is coming through tomorrow and he will likely set bail." The sheriff looked at Sarah with something like pity. "I came to tell you that you need to be careful. Hartford is making a lot of threats. He has friends in Lead, men who work at the mine with him. They might try to help him come after you." "What can we do?" Sarah asked. "Get out of the territory if you can," the sheriff said bluntly. "Go somewhere he cannot find you, because once he is out of jail he is going to come looking and I cannot protect you forever." Sarah looked at Isaac and saw her own thoughts reflected in his eyes. Running again. She was so tired of running, but what choice did they have? "We will leave today," Isaac said. "Thank you for the warning, Sheriff." After the sheriff left, Sarah and Isaac loaded her belongings into the wagon and headed back to Isaac's ranch. They did not speak much on the journey, both of them lost in thought. When they reached the ranch, Isaac helped Sarah inside and then began packing supplies for a longer journey. "Where will we go?" Sarah asked. "Wyoming Territory," Isaac said. "I have a friend who has a ranch near Cheyenne. He owes me a favor. We can stay with him until we figure out what to do next." "What about your ranch? Your cattle?" "I can ask my neighbor to look after them for a while. The ranch will still be here when we get back." Isaac stopped what he was doing and crossed to where Sarah stood. He took her face gently in his hands. "You are more important than any of this, Sarah. I would give it all up if it meant keeping you safe." "I do not want you to have to give up anything for me," Sarah said, tears stinging her eyes. "Then do not think of it that way. Think of it as us starting over together, building something new." Isaac kissed her softly. "We are going to be all right, Sarah. I promise you that." They spent that night at the ranch, making love for the first time in Isaac's bed. It was nothing like what Sarah had experienced with Malcolm, all rough demands and painful mechanics. With Isaac it was tender and passionate, a giving and taking that left her breathless and awed. Afterwards they lay tangled together under the quilts, and Sarah thought that maybe, just maybe, everything really would be all right. They left at dawn the next morning, the wagon loaded with everything they could carry. Isaac had spoken to his neighbor, who had agreed to look after the cattle and the property. As they drove away from the ranch, Sarah looked back once and saw the little house growing smaller in the distance. She hoped they would be able to come back someday. The journey to Cheyenne took a week, and they stopped in Deadwood on the way to say goodbye to Emma and Thomas. Emma was worried but supportive, and she made Sarah promise to write as soon as they were settled. "I am proud of you," Emma said, hugging her sister tightly. "You are so much braver than you know." The trip to Wyoming was long and cold, but Sarah did not mind. She was with Isaac, and that made everything bearable. They talked about their plans for the future, about the life they would build together once Sarah was free of Malcolm. Isaac wanted to buy land and start a horse breeding operation. Sarah wanted to open a small school, teaching children to read and write. They dreamed together, and those dreams felt possible in a way that nothing had felt possible before. Isaac's friend in Cheyenne was a grizzled rancher named Pete who asked no questions and welcomed them warmly. He gave them a small cabin on his property to live in, and Isaac immediately found work helping Pete with his cattle operation. Sarah kept house and helped Pete's wife Martha with the cooking and cleaning. It was simple, hard work, but it was honest work, and they were together. 2 months after they arrived in Cheyenne, Sarah received a letter from Mr. Brennan, the lawyer in Deadwood. Malcolm had been released on bail and had returned to lead, but he had not been able to find any trace of where Sarah and Isaac had gone. He was demanding that the sheriff launch a search, but without any evidence of kidnapping or foul play, there was little the law could do. More importantly, Mr. Brennan had found a sympathetic judge who was willing to hear Sarah's petition for divorce on the grounds of extreme cruelty. If Sarah was willing to come back to Deadwood to testify, there was a good chance the divorce would be granted. Sarah and Isaac discussed it long into the night. Going back to Deadwood meant risking a confrontation with Malcolm, but it also meant the chance for Sarah to finally be free. In the end, the decision was easy. "I am not going to spend the rest of my life hiding," Sarah said. "I want to face him in court and tell everyone what he did to me. I want my freedom, Isaac, really and truly free." "Then we will go back," Isaac said, "and I will be right there beside you the whole time." They made the trip back to Deadwood in early spring, the mountains shedding their snow and the first wildflowers beginning to bloom. Emma and Thomas opened their home to them, and Mr. Brennan prepared Sarah for her testimony. The trial was set for 2 weeks after their arrival, and those 2 weeks felt like the longest of Sarah's life. Malcolm was in the courtroom the day of the hearing, his face hard and unforgiving. He stared at Sarah with such hatred that she felt it like a physical thing, but she did not look away. She was done being afraid of him. When it was her turn to testify, Sarah told the whole truth. She described the beatings, the verbal abuse, the threats on her life. She showed the judge the faded scars on her arms and the medical testimony that Emma's doctor had provided documenting her injuries. She told him about running into the blizzard, about how she would rather have died in the cold than spend another day with Malcolm Hartford. Malcolm's lawyer tried to discredit her, suggesting she was a hysterical woman who had run off with another man and was now trying to justify her infidelity. But Mr. Brennan was brilliant, pointing out that Sarah had fled before she ever met Isaac, that her injuries had been documented by multiple witnesses, and that Malcolm himself had made threats of violence in front of the sheriff and half the town of Deadwood. Isaac testified as well, describing the state Sarah had been in when he found her in the blizzard, the terror in her eyes when Malcolm had confronted them. Emma testified about the bruises she had seen, and the way Malcolm had isolated Sarah from her family. Even the sheriff took the stand to describe Malcolm's threats and violent behavior. In the end, the judge took less than an hour to make his decision. He granted Sarah her divorce on the grounds of extreme cruelty, and furthermore issued a court order forbidding Malcolm from coming within 100 yards of Sarah or contacting her in any way. Sarah wept when the gavel came down, and Isaac pulled her into his arms right there in the courtroom. She was free. After 3 years of hell, she was finally, legally free. Malcolm did not take it well. He stood up and started shouting, calling Sarah every vile name he could think of, until the sheriff and his deputies forcibly removed him from the courtroom. Sarah heard him threatening her even as they dragged him away, but the words had no power anymore. He could not touch her. The law had finally protected her instead of him. 2 days later, Isaac and Sarah were married in a small ceremony at Emma's church, with Emma and Thomas as their witnesses. Sarah wore a simple blue dress that Emma had helped her make, and Isaac wore his best suit. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Isaac kissed her like she was the most precious thing in the world, and Sarah knew that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They stayed in Deadwood for another week, celebrating with Emma and Thomas and finalizing the sale of Sarah's parents' farm. The money from the sale was enough for Isaac to make a down payment on a larger ranch outside Cheyenne, one with good grazing land and a sturdy house. They said goodbye to Emma with promises to visit often, and then they headed back to Wyoming to start their new life together. The ranch outside Cheyenne became their home, and they poured all their energy into making it succeed. Isaac proved to be a skilled horseman and breeder, and within 2 years they had built a solid reputation for quality animals. Sarah opened a small school in their front parlor, teaching the children of neighboring ranchers to read and write. It was everything they had dreamed about during those long, cold nights on the road. A year after they were married, Sarah gave birth to a son. They named him James, and he had Isaac's gray-green eyes and Sarah's dark hair. Isaac was a devoted father, doting on the boy and teaching him to ride almost as soon as he could walk. Sarah watched them together and felt her heart swell with a joy she had never imagined possible. 3 years later, they had a daughter, little Grace, who was as stubborn and fearless as her mother. The house that had seemed too big when they first bought it now rang with laughter and the sound of running feet. Sarah could barely remember the woman she had been when Isaac found her in that blizzard, frightened and broken. That woman was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who knew she was loved and valued. They heard occasionally through mutual acquaintances that Malcolm was still in lead, still working at the mine. He had remarried, and Sarah prayed for his new wife's sake that he had changed, though she doubted it. Men like Malcolm rarely changed, but he was no longer her concern. He was part of a past that she had left behind. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Sarah on a picnic to a meadow overlooking their ranch. The children were spending the day with Pete and Martha, and it was just the two of them for the first time in months. They sat on a blanket and ate fried chicken and biscuits, and Isaac produced a bottle of wine that he had been saving for a special occasion. "Do you ever regret it?" Isaac asked, pouring the wine into tin cups. "Leaving Deadwood, coming out here with me? I know it has not been easy." Sarah looked at him, at this man who had saved her life in every way that mattered, and she smiled. "Not for a single moment. You gave me everything, Isaac. A home, a family, a life worth living. How could I ever regret that?" "I think you gave me just as much," Isaac said. "Maybe more. Before I found you, I was just existing. You taught me what it means to really live." They clinked their cups together and drank, and then Isaac set the cups aside and pulled Sarah into his arms. "I love you," he said, "more than I ever thought it was possible to love another person." "I love you too," Sarah said. "You told me once that I did not have to run anymore, and you were right, because I finally found somewhere worth staying." They kissed there in the meadow, the sun warm on their faces and the sound of birdsong in the air. In the distance, Sarah could see their house, solid and welcoming, smoke curling from the chimney where Martha was probably cooking dinner. Her children were playing somewhere nearby, safe and happy. Her husband's arms were around her, strong and sure. This was her life now. This was her home. And she had never been more grateful for a blizzard. The years continued to roll by in a steady rhythm of seasons and harvests, of horses born and sold, of children growing taller and stronger. James turned out to have his father's gift with animals, and by the time he was 12, he was helping Isaac train the young horses they bred. Grace was more interested in books than livestock, and Sarah taught her to read everything she could get her hands on, watching with pride as her daughter's mind expanded with each new story. When James was 16, he asked if he could go to school in Cheyenne to learn about veterinary medicine. It meant being away from the ranch during the school year, but Isaac and Sarah agreed. They wanted their children to have opportunities they had never had, to chase their dreams wherever they led. Grace, at 13, announced that she wanted to be a teacher like her mother, and Sarah's heart swelled with pride. Isaac's hair began to gray at the temples, and Sarah found lines around her eyes that had not been there before. But she did not mind. Every year with Isaac was a gift, every gray hair and wrinkle a badge of a life well lived. They still sat by the fire together on cold nights, still talked and laughed and dreamed. The passion between them had not dimmed with time. If anything, it had grown deeper, richer, tempered by years of partnership and devotion. On a spring morning when Sarah was 42 years old, she stood on the porch of their ranch house and watched Isaac working with a young stallion in the corral. He was 53 now, his body still strong from years of hard work, his movements sure and confident. He looked up and saw her watching, and the smile he gave her was the same one that had made her heart skip 20 years ago. Their grandson, James's son, was asleep in Sarah's arms, a tiny bundle barely 3 weeks old. James had married a sweet girl from Cheyenne, a doctor's daughter named Helen, and they had brought the baby out to the ranch for the christening. Grace was engaged to a young lawyer from Denver, and the wedding was planned for the summer. Sarah's life was full to bursting with love and family, and all the things she had once thought she would never have. Sometimes, late at night when she could not sleep, Sarah thought about that day in the blizzard. She thought about how close she had come to dying in the snow, how easily things could have gone differently. If Isaac had not been out checking his cattle that day, if he had not seen her through the storm, she would never have lived to see any of this. Her children would never have been born. This whole beautiful life would never have existed. But he had found her. He had wrapped his coat around her and brought her home and told her she did not have to run anymore. And everything that came after, every joy and triumph and moment of grace, flowed from that single act of kindness. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, climbing the porch steps to stand beside her. He looked down at his grandson with wonder in his eyes. "Just counting my blessings," Sarah said. She leaned against her husband's solid warmth, the baby safe between them. "And being grateful that you found me." "Best thing I ever did," Isaac said, kissing the top of her head. "Saving you saved me too, you know." Sarah smiled, watching the sun climb higher in the clear blue sky. Somewhere far away, in a town she rarely thought about anymore, Malcolm Hartford was living whatever life he had made for himself. But here, in this place she and Isaac had built together, there was only love and peace and the promise of countless tomorrows. She had stopped running that day in the blizzard, and she had never looked back, and every single day since had been worth staying for.